Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers! Tiki here.
And Blue Dragon 5.
In honor of Black History Month, we thought we'd pay tribute and showcase the great defining black characters the world has come to love.
This year we're doing something brand new. Instead of talking fictional black heroes on the page and screen, we've decided to celebrate the real-life heroes that make the things we love on the page and screen possible. Each of the four prolific icons a titan in their respective field.
So without further delay, let's explore the history of Floyd Norman, the Animator, on Black History Heroes. Alright, Dragon, good to be back. Good to be back. This year, of course, Black History is more prevalent than ever, given everything that's gone down in the past year, and I'm happy to be a part of it. And let's just dive right into it, Dragon. Before we get into our subject, Dragon, I need to get up on my soapbox, because I feel like this is a very relevant topic. Disney Plus, one of the things I've noticed, they're actually doing a really good job with the Black History stuff, curating it. What I like about it is that they're kind of separating it into different categories and subgenres within it. It's not just like, ooh, black stories. No, it's like they're kind of like, what kind of black story do you want to watch? I like that about Disney Plus. But you know what's not on Disney Plus during Black History Month that really should be, that really shines a light on Disney history and Black history, and it just fucking makes me insane that it's not there? Floyd Norman, An Animated Life. Dragon, I'm sorry. Like, before we go any further with this, and this is going to kind of bleed into my thesis, because that documentary very much is the introductory point for me on the subject of this evening. Why is it not on Disney Plus? I understand the man had his issues with the company, but for God's sakes, he's a Disney legend, he's an icon, y'all are wanting black representation, hello, fucking, McFly! I don't know, Dragon, I don't know, it's idiotic to me. Well, and not only is it not on Disney Plus, you can't even rent this thing on Amazon.
Yeah, that's
I wanted to pay money for this thing, Dragon, and I couldn't even do that.
Yeah, that's the real travesty. Not only is it not on Disney Plus, I mean, this thing, it's pretty much impossible to find now. Which, again, go back to years ago with, like, 2016 when it pretty much came out, and I guess, like, maybe a year or so afterwards, it was on Netflix, and you could find it very easily.
Now, I was flabbergasted when I tried to find this thing, Dragon. I was looking for hours, and I was just like, I'm not coming up with anything. Even my, even my sources, shall we say, came up empty, a bunch of broken links there. So I don't know what to tell you, man. I definitely watched the documentary a couple times, but, in terms of, like, just kind of going into my introduction, I mean, Floyd Norman, I knew about Floyd Norman for a long time. His name always pops up in biographies and history books about the Disney company, of course, him being the first African-American Disney animator, that's big, obviously a big benchmark for animation and just kind of black history in general. And I think that the really interesting thing about Floyd Norman, though, Dragon, I feel like this is going to be what a lot of the conversation tonight kind of hinges on, is not only is he a black icon, but he's an icon for anti-ageism, and he really has a super inspirational story that I honestly think could make a damn good biopic about, kind of like he's one of the, one of the trailblazers of getting rid of the stupid forced retirement at age 65 thing. And Dragon, I think it's kind of like, it's fun and simpatico that we're talking about this right after reviewing Mean Seasons on Batman the Animated Series. Kind of like, we didn't intend for that to happen at all, but it's a little bit of synergy there. So yeah, I mean, overall, I've always really admired Floyd's work. Dude's a trailblazer, and I think he's definitely one of the most interesting characters in the kind of like the old school Disney lineup of animators and personalities that were at the studio, and I'm excited to talk about his life. I definitely think there's a lot of stuff to get into and mine from, and just in general, Dragon, I gotta say, I'm really excited about this season of Black History Heroes, because I feel like we've got a really good roster of just icons to kind of draw from and really get, because the animator folks, that's one of 4 fields that we're covering this month, so we're going kind of across the board of the entertainment industry and seeing how these folks kind of influence it. So I think it's going to be a really fun, really kind of a fulfilling journey that we're going to take with you guys. All right, Dragon, so what is your introductory point for Floyd Norman?
Yeah, so I think the first time I really, honest to goodness, learned about Floyd Norman was through that amazing documentary, Floyd Norman Animated Life. Check it out now, kids, and by that I mean pay the ridiculous amount of money they're asking for the physical copy on Amazon. Oh, God, I don't know. Here's the thing: if you actually go to the website that advertised the movie, they were selling it in 2016. I don't know if they're still selling it now. I mean, I guess go there and buy it if they're still selling it. But no, seriously. I mean, I was lucky enough. Like, I bought like the last used copy they had on Amazon.
Oh man!
I'm not desperate, folks. I made sure it was in good shape and everything. But I got it. But regardless, seriously though, back when we could actually watch it. Kids. I love that documentary. It was so informative. Of course, the main reason honestly, when I went into that thing, I really didn't even know what I don't think I knew about the Disney Connect at all initially. I just thought, hey, first black animator. It's kind of interesting. The draw there. Yeah. Like, yeah, I like to learn about this guy. I'm always up for a good Netflix documentary, so watching that. And I had no idea how widespread the man's history was. I mean, Disney, Pixar, Hanna-Barbera. There's a whole bunch of other, great stuff as well. And basically, I feel Gary Trousdale, he summarized Floyd Norman perfectly. And that so accurately, he is the Forrest Gump of animation. Every milestone or major moment in animation, Floyd Norman's there. Like, we photoshopped him in. He's right there. We put him in there Zemeckis style. He's right there.
He could be like the new Bernie meme, where he's just like in all these historical moments, just sitting there on his animation desk, just copying it all down.
Sure, but that's the thing. So Floyd Norman, the man, is an animator's animator, and all these years later, he's still. I just love that. He's so beloved by everybody in the industry, and he's just still seen by everyone as he's just the earnest kid he started off as in the industry, which I find so heartwarming. Just you look at the man, he exudes kind of a youthful zeal, don't you think? You just I know. The man's 85 now. But he just doesn't feel it. Doesn't look it, Just, I don't know. It's just,
well, Dragon, that's exactly like been my one of my big philosophies is life. As someone who's really passionate about Disney and animation and all that good stuff. Is I obviously let's go back to the whole I just turned 30 thing, which obviously 30, 85, tomato, but I really am passionate about the idea that, like, it doesn't matter how old you are, as long as you kind of, like, hold on to that spark, hold on to that youthful energy, hold on to that kind of, like, head in the cloud kind of optimism. And the older I get, Dragon, frankly, the less I care about if people think the head in the cloud optimism thing is stupid or not. Like, I really, I'm just doing my thing and living my best life. And, if you don't like it, you all can fuck off, because I've got a good support system around me. So I gotta tell you, man, that kind of stuff is rather inspirational. Just seeing older folks, folks who are kind of in the twilight of their lives, just still living it up like they're in the prime of their lives. I really dig that kind of stuff. Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to get off on a tangent there.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, of course, just again, man, just absolutely beloved in the industry. Again, he's touched many lives, and he's just always kind of like the chipper reminder of what the animation field can be.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, so let's talk some legacy. Let's talk about some of like the big claims to fame that the great Floyd Norman has.
Legacy? What is a legacy? I can't help it. I can't help it.
Just
I can't help it. At least I didn't do it all dramatically.
Anyway,
Like, it's like a nervous tick.
and yet we're still talking about it. So can we refocus? So
Okay, yes. So, of course, as we obviously already said, Disney's first black animator. Dragon, I want you to refresh my memory. Do you know if this was the first black animator, or just the first one at Disney?
well, that's the thing. As far as I can find, it's at Disney. I mean,
I want to say that's accurate. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's somebody we're not thinking of who probably was the first black animator. But I mean, I'd like to think it was Floyd Norman as well, just for kind of the synergy of it all, because that'd be awesome. Just not only the first, Disney's first black animator, he's like the first black animator. But no, still, that's pretty big though. He's the first kind of like, again, like of the most famous studio in regards to animation. I mean, that's that's really big. And let me tell you the important thing about him being Disney's first black, first African American animators, to give it the full kind of fancy title. Floyd Norman, he's always been very much the staunch defender of the Disney legacy. He's very famous for having demystified the long-standing myths and about prejudice in the Disney company, not just towards black animators, but towards other fields. And he stood up like
I've always thought those myths were just kind of ridiculous, if I'm being frank. I mean, Walt Disney was a hard boss, Dragon. He was a hard boss to work with. He was a perfectionist. His cough sent shivers down the spines of his employees because
they all scattered. They all stood out of his line of sight.
But with that being said, it was because he was so drawn to his craft. It had literally nothing to do with any sort of prejudice. And I don't know, Dragon. I maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid. I haven't worked at the Walt Disney Family Museum. I don't know, but for me, I just think every time people make a claim like that, it's based on just nonsense. I don't know. That's my 2 cents about it. And yes, I'm very glad that someone like Floyd Norman is out there, preaching the good word about Walt, because Walt is I'm not going to sit there and put Walt on a pedestal. He was a flawed person for sure.
I mean, again, the strike, really. That's like, you can say a lot of nice things about Walt Disney, but every time the strike comes into play, it's like, wow.
And honestly, the older I get, the more cynical I get about the idea of Epcot just in general. Like, the more scary and utopian it sounds, if I'm being completely honest with you.
Right.
But yeah, no, just generally speaking, the man was flawed. But anyways, like I said, it's just great to have someone like Floyd kind of fighting the good fight in that regard.
So the other thing, he's worked in multiple mediums and departments. I mean, he's both worked in hand drawn as well as 3D animation, and basically he's worked everywhere there's a Disney campus. He's either worked at or in conjunction with. I mean, he didn't go to the Florida studio, but he's worked with he was kind of corresponded with the Florida studio.
You know what the interesting thing in that regard is with his career is that I feel like, unlike other animators, he doesn't necessarily have like a signature to him. And I don't necessarily say that in a bad way, because he's a jack of all trades. You know what I mean? Whereas other like with an Eric Goldberg, it's an Eric Goldberg character as soon as you see it. You know what I mean? That's just one example, or a Frank Thomas, for example.
Sure.
But with Floyd, I feel like Floyd just kind of like, instead of developing his signature, what he did was he kind of became just kind of like the Joshua Thomas style man of many hats throughout the studio. He wore all those hats. He could just kind of be your go-to guy for anything you needed.
Including the fedora.
Right.
Anyway, so, okay, another big one, Vignette Films Incorporated. So, Vignette Films Inc., this was the company that he co-founded with his good old pal, Leo Sullivan. So Leo Sullivan and the boys, they formed this company that basically did live action as well as animated educational films on Black history, which at the time was a really alien and foreign concept, where they were outsourced. Basically, like, if people wanted things done, especially in conjunction with Black history, in general too, it didn't just have to be Black history, but hey, there's a new animation company outside the big ones, and this is a time before Hanna-Barbera has really made its mark. So this is where some other claims to fame within the company. Soul Train, the Soul Train logo, the train going by, that's them. Some of the Sesame Street segments.
Oh, yeah, I'm not surprised on the Sesame Street thing.
Some work
Sure,
for Filmation.
sure.
That is also them. So point being, Floyd Norman and company, they got around. And again, breaking mediums, live action as well as animating. And they did really good work. I mean, Floyd Norman knew where to point a camera, man. He really knew. He had a good kind of... I know, really, as you kind of mentioned with the Eric Goldberg thing, is that, yeah, pretty much it's kind of hard to delineate Floyd Norman's style. But I don't know what to tell you, man. You look at some of the original stuff that they did with their company, that these guys knew how to frame their shots and did these live action kind of educational films. Like, they really kind of there was something kind of unique about it. If you ever go back to it, it's interesting.
Oh yeah, no, most definitely. Those old kind of like 60s?
Yeah.
Yeah, those old 60s Sesame Street shorts. I'm not saying he did all the Sesame Street stories.
Yeah, like 60s and maybe the early 70s.
Yeah. But I'm saying, like, the ones that he did, I'm sure you could probably go back and find a distinct style to them. I'm talking mostly in the, in the canon of Disney animation. That's where he was more of a jack of all trades.
Certainly, because that's the main thing I can say about Floyd Norman's style, which again we kind of have like a good in that documentary you get to see like the little cartoony kind of buffers where we get to see some of the stuff recreated. And Floyd Norman, so he did, from what I understand, he did all those buffers. He did all like little cartoon of Floyd and his wife and everything meeting each other and the whole little cartoony Floyd, like all the Walt is like his character. It's done in his style, so we get to see his caricature style. Floyd Norman has kind of very much like kind of a quick draw, kind of caricature sketchy style.
Sure.
If anything, it's like it's quick. It tells you everything you need to know about characters. The point being, the man that these caricatures are legendary.
Fits with the Disney movies he worked on, and we'll get there.
Yes, of course. Like another claim to fame, the almighty caricature and the comic strip work he did for Disney with the Vignette films. I'm going to highlight. It's going to come back later. The 16mm Bolex camera. So Vignette, basically, he and the guys at Vignette Films, they got their hands on this Bolex camera, but a very special camera. This camera belonged to Roy E. Disney. They bought it from Roy E. Disney, essentially. So they bought the camera that was used by Roy E. Disney, and they took it to another big claim to fame with the whole legacy of it, especially the Black History Month of all, is that they used this camera to capture. It was like the first camera used to capture the Watts riots. And again, that was in
the documentary, right?
Yeah, that's in the documentary. Yeah,
that was one of the most that was one of the most mind-blowing parts of the documentary for me.
And the idea, they were kind of protected because they had that camera.
Right.
Which is crazy, but yeah, it was huge, But seriously, I mean, they really made. Not only did they make history at Vignette Films, they were literally a part of history, man. It was awesome. And of course, as you kind of alluded to earlier, Disney legend, as well as inducted into the Black Filmmakers Hall of Fame again for the Watts riots and just the works of Vignette Films. So yeah, it's a lot of big claims to fame.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go into the origin story, Dragon, and this is probably you're probably gonna have to take the reins on this because again you were lucky enough to score a copy before I did. So go ahead.
All right, so Floyd Norman, he's a kid from Santa Barbara. His first films were, I think, Bambi, but mainly Dumbo. Dumbo was the first
Bambi,
film.
he was probably like, if anything, like a background animator or something like that.
Right. No, I mean, as a kid, he saw these films, Tiki, but yeah.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. Yeah,
So
sure.
He's a kid. He's literally a kid from.
My bad.
It's like 1935.
I'm mixing up eras.
It was like 1935, so he's a kid, and then he grows up.
He's a child prodigy, Dragon. Walt Disney brought him on board. I'm sorry, Dragon. That was dumb of me. Go ahead.
Anyway, so point being, I think the first film might have been Bambi, but like the real first film for him, like the one where he kind of was cognizant enough to really kind of have an impact, was Dumbo. So sees Dumbo at the Arlington Theater, in Santa Barbara, which basically was introduction to animation. The kid gets the bug that he's drawing on the walls. He's drawing on his schoolwork. He's got the bug big time, man. And a science teacher, at some point, kind of pulls the big moment of destiny here. Science teacher kind of calls up his golf buddy, or at least a guy who knows a guy who's a golf buddy with a comic artist, Bill Wagon. Now, Bill Wagon, he was working on the Katie Keene comic, a spin-off from the Archie comics, which oddly enough has a crappy CW show as well now. So
does it fucking really? What the hell?
Tiki, I'm not kidding.
Why?
Anyway,
sorry. Go ahead. What the hell, CW?
All right, so the point is that this teacher gave him an outlet for
Did they ever make that Josie and the Pussycat show they were going to make?
Well, that's I think at the end of the day, I don't know if Josie and Pussycats appears primarily in the. I think they end up in the Katie Keene show. I haven't watched it, so I don't know.
Oh my God! All right, you know what? It's like if they made a Josie and the Pussycat spinoff, that'd make a lot of sense. But whatever. I don't want to
just to make this relevant. I'm just going to make this tangent relevant here.
Yeah,
Floyd Norman did work on Josie and the Pussycats.
Okay. Ah, nice.
All right. Anyway, so
before Josie and the Pussycats, one of the first cartoons to include a very prominent, strong black female character.
Yep.
So
okay, now refocusing. So the point being, the kid has an outlet as an assistant for Bill Wagon on the comic Katie Keene. And just to talk about, again, just kind of like Floyd Norman the man here is kind of bleed into the background. So, he if you look at Floyd Norman's background, he really grew up sheltered versus the usual, the story we usually hear a lot with some of the greats. There's a harsh kind of black experience and growing up, there's like a scarcity of resources. But no, Floyd, essentially, the idea is his family was really perceptive back then. They kind of saw, well, things are a little rough around here. Let's go to Santa Barbara, which essentially, as Floyd kind of framed it through the lens of his family, it was kind of like it was the promised land. Let's go to Santa Barbara. Things are kind of cool here.
I'm not gonna lie, California is pretty dope when it comes to not being racist for the most part.
Yeah, especially back in the 30s, though. That's the thing. Like back in the 30s, it was pretty simple.
Yeah, that's one of the things I pride my state on for sure.
So yeah, basically there was that at play, and his family nurtured the creativity, and again, this kind of like his grandmother enrolled him in these art classes at a museum, which kind of helped refine his skills. In high school, he gets the drama bug. And
you know what? I like that. That's a cool synergy thing with the art classes at the museum, because I know that he has sat in on art classes at the Walt Disney Family Museum, and and kind of taught workshops and stuff there. So that's a nice kind of full circle thing. Anyways,
like Ka eating his own tail, man.
right. Go ahead.
So also he's doing some plays in high school, which basically gives him kind of the other half of the equation here. So he's animating, but also he's seeing kind of the big business of animation, the entertainment and the showbiz bug. So mix those two together, you get like hope for the animation business. And one day his father, I believe, drove by the Disney studio, and he says, "That's it. So that's Disney." It's like just this big moment of I saw the building. So that's where the magic happens.
She'll take on the image of a bat.
Pretty much. Yes. So then we have I'm so glad you used that, because now we have the little comic book origin. So again, literally, Floyd Norman is doing comic books with Katie.
Yeah.
He's learned the business. He's seen the Disney is coming to play. Is giving him kind of something to shoot for. So he applied to Disney after high school, did the Donald Duck pencil test. Essentially, they kind of start him off, see what they can do. So he's doing like a pencil test of Donald Duck, which you get a lot of ducks in the early career of Floyd Norman, oddly enough. So he's told to they turn him down. They tell him to refine his skills. Go to school, go to like a animation college of some sort. Kind of learn the craft. And anyway, so he goes to the Pasadena Art College for 3 years, and then this is really special. 1957. This never happens. Disney calls him. So what happened is they kept his work in mind or on file or something. They remembered from that interview, which again, is today. They remembered him way back in 50s, like 55, I guess at that point. And they basically offer him a job of an in-betweener, like kind of originally like an assistant to an in-betweener, which would then work its way up from there. And ironically, when they call him, according to Floyd Norman, he was watching the Mickey Mouse Club. So there's your I shall don the, and of course years later, he's going to do the Mickey Mouse comic. I
shall don the image of a mouse.
Exactly. You see, it's all just. So, I mean, it's on the temperament of you've gotten a good vibe on Floyd Norman. So it's just the temperament of the man in general, the impression of Floyd Norman. I mean, he's a pleasant, friendly guy, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of funny because I feel like a lot of the we don't have a lot of surviving animators. Dragon, he's one of the very few left from Walt's era, but we do have some surviving Imagineers. And Dragon, the surviving Imagineers were from the 60s. And all I can say is that, man, they're I love them to death. I totally want to meet them, but they all seem like a bunch of old hippies. And I'm not saying that in a bad way at all, because they pretty much are. But, Floyd Norman, he doesn't have that vibe to him. He's got more of like a, like a down-to-earth kind of like, aw, shucks vibe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the thing I want to hit, too, is so basically you have this pleasant, friendly guy with this Forrest Gump luck. And he just shows up everywhere. It's kind of like, but here's the thing. I love that. I think fundamentally the reason his origin kind of works out the way it does, that people are drawn, ironically enough, with the word choice, people are drawn to Floyd Norman and vice versa, that he draws for them. But there's really just drawn to Floyd, and that kind of leads to, like, think about it. Floyd Norman's entire life is so deeply intertwined with the Walt Disney Company. He met his wife, who I believe also the second wife, the love of his life, sort of wife, Adrian. Mm-hmm. Adrian, she worked at Disney, and
there's a lot of meeting your spouse at Disney for people who have worked at the Disney Company. There's a lot of that goes down.
Absolutely. So she's got she's the hat going. She kind of introduces when they meet each other, she forms like the other half of his iconic look. He's got the big aviator shades, and now he's got the hat. She's
yeah.
It's true. He met as Joan Lee, essentially, man. That's really something special. And again, this, Floyd, and also as we kind of teed up earlier, and this is as important as our transition thing. So Floyd Norman, hired by Disney, proves. I mean, it's always like the irrefutable proof in a sense, and that as he defends many times, prove that Disney didn't discriminate. Didn't discriminate just based on.
God, you know what it is, Dragon?
What?
Oh, this is a super cheesy tie-in, but I'm gonna make it. It's proof that Tony Stark has a heart.
That's kind of a stretch, but okay.
Anyways, I'm sorry. But,
yeah, so it was proof that Disney. It was kind of irrefutable proof Disney didn't discriminate. I mean, also against that, just to take it out of the Norman of it all. I mean, also with the ink, there was always the rumor of the ink and paint girls being. Not being able to advance and all that, basically being put down there because it's women's work, which was not the case. See,
I think that's BS, just because some of Walt's most respected animators were women. I cite you one Mary Blair.
That's what I'm saying. You're absolutely correct, Teague. I'm just saying people sometimes they always take that as like, that was the old stupid kind of like assumption made along with the whole like Disney doesn't hire blacks, where then Floyd Norman just says, well, no one's really, because of that line of thinking, people haven't applied. That's why.
Exactly. Thank you.
Where there was a reason that the ink and paint girls, they could handle. Not because they were women, because if anything, it was because there was a patience and a fine eye to detail, where the male animators, they would just go crazy doing the same, inking the same cells over and over again. That was the main difference, that women had steady hands and they were good at what they did.
Can I just point out that Walt Disney literally married an ink and paint girl? So it's like, come on now.
That's what I'm saying. Basically, at the end of the day, the big takeaway is that there was no reason to discriminate because, one, it was behind the scenes, and two, it was talent-based. As if you could do the job and you were good at it, you got the job at Disney. Because, one, who's going to notice? And two, it's like, again, we want you for the good talent. So, All right, so that brings us to, let's talk the man. Let's kind of highlight let's talk the many milestones at the Mickey Mouse Company and other places that Floyd Norman has contributed to.
Okay, so I just want to run over this early filmography of his, because I think it's super interesting based on that, like you said, he had kind of like that sketchbook kind of caricature design quality of his, and I do think it fits all of these films to one degree or another.
I mean, especially those early films had a little bit of that kind of like that.
Well, this late 50s, early 60s era of Disney animation. Yeah. You got to remember, Dragon, outside of Sleeping Beauty, which Walt did have a lot of involvement in. Of course, he named Sleeping Beauty Castle after that film to promote it, and that film had a really ambitious art style. But 101 Dalmatians and Sword in the Stone, those two really were like the kind of the forgotten Disney movies in that era. I mean, they're not so forgotten nowadays. But back then, it was really like Walt kind of like was very hands-off with those two in particular. He got a little bit more hands-on for the Jungle Book. But those two in particular, especially Sword in the Stone, had very little involvement from Walt. And because of that, they kind of, if you watch them, both of those movies, I kind of use the classical music and jazz comparison. They feel like jazz. You know what I mean? They kind of feel like the animators being really freewheeling with what they want to do. Like a good example with Sword in the Stone is, you get all the wizard transformations and shenanigans like that. Obviously, with 101 Dalmatians, that film is very stylized. It looks way different than any other Disney film before it had looked, with like the pencil marks kind of still in the character animation and stuff like that. And so because of that, because it was so freewheeling, I really feel like Floyd was I could just picture him just kind of like diving in like a duck to water in that sort of environment.
Yeah, I mean, the really cool thing about that era of Disney that kind of reflects is that those are like true blue hand-drawn films, and you can see the pencil and the paper in those.
Literally, yeah.
Which is really cool, And so basically, Floyd in the beginning, he learned a lot about the processes. He basically learned a lot about the animation process as an in-betweener, because again, he's not doing the full-on animation during these early works. Like he's just, at this point, like he's doing the tedious kind of the grunt work in the animation field. He's the guy like doing like, okay, so between like the big moments on the screen, we have like getting from point A to point B. So he's going to stumble before he gets, he's doing all the stumbling animation. He's doing like the poses in between the big money shots.
Sure.
And he got to work with members of the Nine Old Men. Milt Cole was his favorite. He got to work with him, and they also did a lot of Ludwig von Drake stuff.
Nice.
Ward Kimball, actually, fun little thing here. Ward Kimball actually, Floyd Norman had a relatively smooth, kind of, like he never really had any, like, again, prejudicial kind of moments at Disney, but the very few he did at the beginning, there were some people maybe a little wary about the first black animator. Ward Kimball chewed him out. He straightened it out, and pretty much, and for all you can tell, there were no more problems after Ward Kimball straightened out.
That's awesome.
Right? Yeah, I mean, again, Ward Kimball and Milt Cole. Ward Kimball, if I recall, he was the train guy. He was, right?
Yes, absolutely. Him and, to a lesser extent, Ollie Johnston.
Yeah.
But Ollie Johnston kind of, like, joined in the fun after the fact. Ward Kimball was absolutely the guy who was like, hey, Walt, trains!
Absolutely. So, really, again, there's the Nine Old Men, obviously the rock stars of the olden days of Disney. So, of course, so the features, I mean, just a little note is, so Floyd, he did the Three Fairies in, the Three Fairies in Sleeping Beauty.
Classic. I mean, that right there, because like I said, that film is very stylized, very sophisticated in its artwork and style. But the fairies are definitely the most loose pieces of animation in that film, so it totally makes sense that you would do them.
The thing everyone forgets about Sleeping Beauty, one of the most beautiful, it's a gorgeous looking film, right? It was so complicated to do because, again, it's going to take twice the draw, like triple the amount of
I would wager to say it's probably the most unique looking of all the Disney films in terms of just like the sheer style of it, and they never made anything that looks remotely close to it ever again.
Exactly, because again, that took a lot of manpower, Tiki, so much so, and I completely forgot about this, so...
if only the movie itself weren't so boring.
I know, that's the problem. It's gorgeous. That movie.
Yeah, Sleeping Beauty's a frustrating movie.
I know, it's gorgeous, and Aurora has a nice song, but that's about it.
It's
a nice song. It's
kick-ass finale, but yeah.
But again, old style. So anyway, so the film That Beautiful, basically they had 500 animators, and after that film they had 75 to compensate for all the manpower. It didn't perform necessarily the way they wanted to.
Yeah.
So to compensate and keep the animation, there was a point, Tiki, where it is whittled down to 75 animators, and they actually had to contemplate shutting down the animation division to do the other stuff with Disney, but Walt kept
you gotta remember, Dragon, at this point, Walt was like all in on the theme park stuff, and not just the theme park stuff, but at this point, I'm sure Epcot was probably in his mind's eye. So Walt was very uninterested in film by the end of his career.
Yeah.
Like Mary Poppins was kind of like one of the late stage things that got him back into filmmaking, but obviously that wasn't completely animation. That had more to do with like the special effects side of things. And Jungle Book, like I said, he had a little bit of involvement in from a story point of view, but even then he was a little disattached from that. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. In this era, like, it would not surprise me if Walt himself shut down the animation division.
Yeah, but again, you kept it going, and it's really impressive that Floyd survived, being the new young hire. He survived that kind of that exodus of like, we went from 500 to 75. That's crazy.
Right.
So 101 Dalmatians, of course, years later, Floyd gets to animate the rest of the Thunderbolt sequence of the little, of the show. That's really cool when they re-released that. Floyd Norman actually went to war for a brief time. He did active service, I want to say, in the Korean War, so that's why he's he kind of was in 101 Dalmatians. He was kind of pulled out for the war. Does Sword in the Stone with Milt Kahl.
Of course.
And Mary Poppins, he did the supercalifragilistic scene. He was the guy. So here's what Floyd Norman did. In the scene, you have the band behind him. He had to tediously do all the animating, like little pearls on the end.
Oh, I remember that from the documentary. Yeah. Oh man, that must have been a tough job. Oh God. Just thinking about doing that.
Yeah.
Honestly, Dragon, thinking about doing that with a computer sounds super tedious, but
I know,
doing it hand-drawn,
and like all the pearls, man, all the on at least four or five characters. It might be 3 anyway. So then, of course, we end up with Jungle Book. So with Jungle Book, we really got to hit the Walt Disney of it all here. So really, there's a really touching story between him and Walt Disney. Is that I'm not saying it's as close as like the Sherman Brothers necessarily, but Floyd Norman, being the young buck that he was, he became Walt Disney's gag guy. In that Floyd Norman, as we well know,
Sherman-esque, honestly, like not quite as intimate, but definitely, there was definitely a bond there for sure.
No, absolutely, there was a bond, but it wasn't as like personal as it was with the Sherman Brothers.
With the Shermans, like they were basically his sons.
That's what I'm saying. That was a little more special because they gave voice to Walt's favorite song, man. Yeah. But no, still though, I mean, here's where it boils down to. So basically, the thing we well know from Wake and Sleep and Beauty, the caricature is big at Disney. People love caricatures, but Floyd Norman, I'm not saying he's necessarily the first, but he was one of the most prevalent caricaturists at the studio. He did all sorts of characters of his friends and his fellow animators, and of course, famously Walt. A lot of fun, grumpy Walt drawings. And Walt took notice of this, and this earned him kind of the title of, again, less the boys, more "Hey Kid." He had "Hey Kid." That's what he got. He was like, so it's like, oh my God, Walt noticed me. It was like, hey, you didn't blow his stag. I was like, hey kid, come over here.
Yeah,
he was the kid, man. So he didn't get in trouble. But what happened was Walt's revenge on Floyd Norman is that he promoted him from he was very content being an in-betweener. He promoted him to the storyboard artist in Jungle Book.
Mm-hmm.
Which is awesome, and that kind of leads to him being involved very famously on the Ka sequence, which of course is "Trust in Me."
That is probably his most iconic sequence.
Yes, and again, that's kind of the melding of him and the Sherman Brothers. Where Floyd pitches the sequence, and then hey, this is so good. Maybe we should. Walt's suggesting to do a song which kind of melds, the boy with the boys.
Oh God.
Yeah, so of course, unfortunately, Jungle Book means Walt is not long for this world, so he passes away. We're all very sad, but that gives basically there's no one around to please anymore. So Floyd Norman, he kind of goes out to hang his own shingle, one could say. It's kind of sweet though. I always felt it was kind of sweet that Floyd Norman, he kind of becomes a Disney in his own right with Vignette Films, and that's kind of nice.
Yep.
So, he and the gang, they're basically running Vignette Films. We already kind of went over that already, kind of the importance of that. But basically, they're very again, it was not a lucrative business, which essentially means these guys, they
It seemed more like something you would do as a passion project and not something you would go into business specifically to get rich off of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because Vignette Films, by the way, so Floyd Norman's with Disney for 10 years, and so after 10 years, Disney does Vignette Films, and he's basically filling this unexpected kind of spot in the animation and film industry, because no one's making educational films on Black history. That's a very big thing.
Very few people are making educational films in general. Like Sesame Street was one of the pioneers in that regard, right?
Exactly. I mean, we're Jungle Book's what was it, roughly 67? So yeah, I mean,
Jungle Book was 66, 67, yeah.
Yeah, I think. Well, that's what I'm saying. So Sesame Street, it's roughly.
It was in production in 66. It came out 67. All
right. Yes. My point is, Sesame Street's probably in its infancy, if not even I forget when Sesame Street was around necessarily. I always think of Sesame Street in the 70s, but I know it was around before that.
I think it was late 60s. I want to say it started in late 60s. I could be wrong though.
Anyway, so The point being, yeah. So the education stuff is really untapped potential, and again, not really the big money maker. So this is a very earnest kind of company and really kind of an earnest endeavor, which kind of led to the tragedy that these guys they put their heart and soul into some really good stuff here. The noble pursuit, but essentially kind of bled them dry over time. Is they ran out of money. They had to like steal supplies from their own studio sometimes, and my favorite thing is that they had to operate out of a coffee shop for a while, which I think is awesome. So eventually that goes under, but again, noble. Very noble pursuit. Very, again, like, it's a nice pillar in Black history Floyd Norman has with the work of Vignette films, I thought. So anyway, so eventually...
Well, like you said, I mean, that in itself, well, no, there's other things too, but I feel like it kind of gets his foot in the door in regards to, the being in the Black Filmmaker Hall of Fame.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so he returns to Disney. Basically, now here's what brought him back to Disney. He was offered the and this is not in the documentary, but he goes back to Disney for the opportunity to animate, because Floyd Norman never necessarily he wasn't able to be like the full-on animator. He was in between, which again, you're working your way up to animator, and he did the storyboarding process, but never got to do the full the Inflangrata. So he was able to animate on Robin Hood, which and he's mentioned about the infamous dance scene. By the way, he's come down. He's mentioned
Lord.
Yeah, this is not in the documentary either.
Oh, I remember when I first found out about that Dragon. It blew my mind. Oh, God. Of
course, very infamously in Robin Hood, they just lifted a dance sequence. Like, what? Do you remember what they did? They had lifted from, like, what?
Snow White.
What?
It's Snow White. It's a very famous dance scene where Snow White is dancing with the dwarves on each other's shoulders.
Right. So, basically, we're taking this...
God.
Just ripped off this.
No, but Snow White, like, that was like the main dance, but like throughout that whole scene is like a Frankenstein's monster of different Disney dance cycles.
Right. So basically, it was like this recycled dance sequence, and Floyd just kind of knew this at the time. Like, basically, what are we doing? Just recycling it. And the director said, no one's going to notice. And of course, years later, they will notice. So this is important. So this is Disney's really going through the transition at this point. So Disney is beginning, basically the 70s and the early 80s was Disney going through, they were really cheaping out on the process and then getting to the whole movies by businessmen committee, which was a mistake. It was like them just, like, again, we're taking out kind of the wholesome kind of creative energy.
Lord knows that they would never, ever go back to the movies as a way of business mentality again, right, Dragon? They would never go back to that.
Right.
Anyways,
so that's things. They're really kind of in kind of like the kind of the cheap way of thinking, which led to one of the most the dumbest things ever. Where they kind of found a BS way to let Floyd go, where they essentially kind of retired him at age 35.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And what they did is they're going to hire like a younger guy who would work faster, they thought, and cheaper, which again definitely stuck with Floyd Norman years later, faster and cheaper, but with certain book namesakes. But he's basically fired for a ridiculous reason where it's like, hey, well, let's shave like 10 years off. Like, again, 10 years of which he worked at Disney, which is talent and experience, but right. So he gets fired off Robin Hood, essentially, for BS reasons, but he gets the last laugh, though, because he gets hired to Hanna-Barbera in a heartbeat, and they pay him double.
Nice.
Again, Disney's cheaping out at this time.
So Hanna-Barbera is essentially, he was like a who's who of, like, doing everything there, right?
Yeah, the really cool thing at Hanna-Barbera, this was like a melting pot for animators. This is like Hanna-Barbera really in its beginnings, Tiki. This is where like Hanna-Barbera was like the hot commodity. It was like Disney had competition for a change. But again, Disney wasn't really doing TV that much in the early days.
Right. So it wasn't even competition that they were really fully looking at the time.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. This is really Disney relatively. I mean, animation in the television format for Disney was like few and far between. I don't even think it was, honestly, I don't think it was existent, but there are really very few examples.
I mean, like, obviously they had Mickey Mouse Club, but that was mostly like 99% recycled animation when they did have animation.
That's about it, I guess. Really think about it. So the point being, that's
and then
really all.
Got some of the animated sequences on the Disneyland shows, like the Ward Kimball Man in Space stuff and things of that nature.
Sure, but that's the point. They didn't really have like a full-on animated show, really.
Right.
So Hanna-Barbera was really a big name at this time, and the important thing is that Floyd Norman, he makes a lot of great friends here. Like these guys, like I assume, like obviously in current years, this has probably been the last 2 years has probably been more difficult, but these are like animators that he would like they meet on the weekends, pretty much weekly, every day of their lives. They go to like a coffee shop and they reminisce over the good old days where there was. Here's the thing: Hanna-Barbera was also, they worked cheap, but important delineation from how Disney was operating at that time is they were cheap but inventive. Where Hanna-Barbera
self-aware.
Yes, they were self-aware. That's the thing. They were self-aware, and Hanna-Barbera, they would like tell them like, okay, no, you're gonna use both sides of the paper. It's like these are guys like by the bootstrap, film animating. It was like, okay, well, we don't have a lot of resources here. We're gonna get the most out of it. Versus like, let's cut corners. It's a different sort of thing. It's very kind of like Jimmy McGill-esque kind of animating. And Floyd was asked to write, so he kind of tries the writing hat on here for the first time because, again, Hanna-Barbera was not really known for their writing that much back in the day.
Oh, no.
So anyone could do it, so Floyd could as well. And Floyd Norman pretty much worked on everything. I mean, famously, Flintstones, a big thing you and I would recognize, Flintstones, The Christmas Carol.
Oh, yeah, big time.
That was him. He did the Scooby-Doo to the point of nauseam for him. He did Johnny Quest, Super Friends, you name it, Floyd's name was on it. Early was there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so eventually ends up back at Disney on the Mickey Mouse comic strip, which oddly enough he did not want this job. Just Disney was in a bind. They called Floyd. In
retrospect, though, I think it's a cool kind of little notch to add to his belt, though. Like he even did comic strip work.
Yeah, and not just any comic strip. He did the Mickey Mouse comic strip. Like the head cheese. And
so like I said, like in retrospect, even though it's not like the most flattering job in the world, I still think it kind of like adds to his man of many hats legacy.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't want it. Honestly, he didn't want it because it's like they call him up, hey Floyd, we want you to come and do a comic strip. Well, you fired me.
Well, that's the thing. It seems kind of like a half-assed like, hey buddy, yeah,
Yep, and basically this is where he kind of develops the bad boy reputation, because Floyd Norman, the bad boy in quotes, the troublemaker, where he would get him in trouble in the legal department because he would use uncopyrighted props in the strip, which then like, wait a minute, you can't use this in a Disney strip. We don't have the rights to this. We're like, what, really, guys? It's like you can't use a waffle iron or something. Like, come on, or what have you, like a satellite dish. I think it was the actual. You can't use a satellite dish. So anyway, so this basically goes from publishing to features, where he's kind of getting his hands on like stuff like Hunchback and Mulan. But he really won on Hunchback, by the way, because he wanted the challenge. Like, oh my God, you can't Disney's doing a Victor Hugo book. He calls up, I think it was Trousdale. Calls up Trousdale. He's like, listen, I want in on this. This is insane. I want in on this. So just
nice.
It's great. And it works on Mulan, and this eventually
project was paid off for Disney in the long run. It wasn't the biggest box office success, but I feel like it's got a huge legacy behind it. Definitely more than any other post Lion King film in the Renaissance era.
Absolutely. So eventually, so in this vein, we're in the 90s. He joins Pixar for Toy Story 2. I'm going to get to how Pixar gets on his radar later, but he ends up on Toy Story 2 and Monsters, Inc. Those are the two Pixar films he really did. So Toy Story 2, his main character was Rex. He did Rex gags.
Nice.
And Tiki, the gag you're thinking of in Toy Story 2, he did the Jurassic Park gag. That was Floyd Norman.
Uh-huh.
He did that, and he's working on Monsters, Inc.
I would say Toy Story 2 was when Rex was at the height of his powers. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Rex was the breakout in that movie, for sure, yeah. I agree. Rex got all the good lines in Toy Story 2. Anyway, so, he's doing he returned from Monsters University, by the way. They kind of called him back for that,
yes.
Years later. It's kind of nice. So, he wanted to stick around Pixar, but he wanted to remain close to his wife, who worked at, the Disney Storybook kind of section of the company. So, he's doing all the publishing stuff, so he kind of stayed close to the company. Unfortunately, couldn't stick around. But then we enter the dark portion of our story here. So, age 65 rolls around. Disney's throwing ageism at poor old Floyd Norman.
Yeah, this is, and like I said, this kind of gets into the part of his story where I think it's even more inspirational than just being the first black animator at Disney. Yeah. It's just, just fighting for this, man, because this is just bullshit.
of the highest order. I mean, think about it. Floyd Norman, he defended Disney so many times on all the bunk, yet the other thing I think I'd like to think Disney, in the best sort of way, Disney would respect about Floyd Norman is like, hey, he's defended all the bunk out there about the company. He's going to call us out on our embarrassing policy. Unfortunately, yeah, that's the thing. Unfortunately, they didn't really. I guess they didn't respond. You know, but yeah, he's like the one calling them out, like how ridiculous their policy is. And again, they've never been any bitter feelings, by the way, with that. So like Disney's always been like Floyd always did it with a smile, with the fun characters, kind of like what he did with Walt. Bear in mind, they're probably not as good humored as Walt, but I think eventually it was like, it's fine. Like they were like Floyd Norman, he wrote an angry letter, but it was like kind of a comically angry letter to him, basically saying like, I was fired because of, basically kind of saying because I broke so many rules, I was such an outlaw, basically like. Nice. So he oversold. Basically, that was it. Kind of set the tone where Floyd, like they were never true like sniping at each other, but Floyd, he never let it go, but he always kind of made fun of them endlessly, and they kind of like. Ideally, given that he's currently still working with Disney, they kind of took it in fun. But still, it's a tragic, just to call out the severity of it, though, it's ridiculous. He does all that good for him, and they let him go at 65, just because he turned 65. And this policy, because of all these call-outs, and because of just how great Floyd Norman is, and all the animators kind of coming to his aid and everything, just seeing all the work that he's done, it seems, the Disney legend of it all, it seems the policy is no more. You and I don't think we have any way of truly knowing if that's no more. Just we've seen a lot of old people and getting honors and everything at Disney. Therefore, I assume the policy is no more, right?
I would hope and assume so. Yes.
Because that's what I'm saying. I mean, just forcing him to retire is just, especially for a second time after that embarrassing first time. Could you imagine
if they forced Yeehaw Bob to retire at age 65, for example?
Exactly. So, it's just...
Hell, I don't even think Yeehaw Bob was 65 when they hired him.
That's the other thing about Floyd Norman. Floyd Norman has always kind of internalized a lot of the bits of strife that have kind of stuck with him are like bits like this, where, the man went through a divorce, which, kind of compartmentalized, but this was a devastating blow, man. He loved Disney. He loved doing his job, and them just kind of saying, we're done with you. You're all used up. You don't have anything to contribute, essentially. That's... Like, calling him the empty toothpaste. Like, he's like an empty tube of toothpaste to them, man. That ain't right.
Yeah.
I mean, just the transition. Again, the sad thing, too, is like some other guys who were older than him, they were allowed to stay. And you know why?
Why?
Because they were directors. Because they worked their way up to director, and like some of the guys they're animators with them that worked up to directing certain projects and stuff, they were allowed to stay. Well, Floyd Norman was always complacent, like I'm fine being an in-betweener. I'm fine just being an animator. I don't need to direct a feature. I don't need to do all this. It's
sure.
Anyway, yes. So again, as we mentioned, Floyd does these fun characters and satires on the Disney company with his series of books like Faster and Cheaper, which is him kind of calling out, in one image, just calling out how ridiculous Disney could be at times. It's really funny. Floyd's Revenge. Yeah. Rebel. And so he was he kind of freelances. So I think Floyd Norman, Tiki, there's a whole bunch of stuff we're not talking about Floyd Norman that I honestly think we have a hard time finding, because the idea is he did a lot of uncredited work, Tiki. We can only find a portion of his uncredited work.
Sure.
That's the thing, because even in his earliest days, like the reason we know he worked on those Disney films, if I'm correct, he wasn't credited on like.
I don't think so. No.
We now know he was, because he's told us he's worked on those things. You can probably have, it was substantiated by by the historians and everything at that time. But like now, I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that he's worked on. I know he worked on Krunk's New Groove. That's like one of the last things.
God.
Like one of the last notable things you can mark on there. It's like, okay, he did Krunk's New Groove, and then it kind of goes blank. But we know he's come back for other stuff though.
Mm.
So let's put a happy end in this story. Let's talk some highlights. Let's talk some of the great moments with Floyd Norman. Let's talk Floydering. Tiki, what is Floydering?
Yeah, so Floydering is essentially just him kind of being around the office, not getting paid, just hanging out. His wife works there, so he's in the office with her, just kind of just making his presence known. Just his little animation desk. And Dre, I love that. I love that kind of like vaguely passive aggressive, like, hey guys, I'm still here.
It's also really sweet too, because he really got close to his wife Adrian by taking her to and from from Disney, from work. He drove her because she had to wait for a bus or something. He just kind of decided to drive her. That's how they really got to know each other. And the fact that years later, he's taken her to Disney, where, again, the sparks kind of flew. And I love that, how Floyd Norman's passion and love for animation as well has led to this innocent rebellion and loophole that so long as he doesn't open the door, and he's taking his wife there anyway, he just stays there. He finds a little empty desk, a little empty kind of nook somewhere, and he goes to work. Not for money, just to do what he loves. Uncompensated, no credits probably. And again, he's Disney's lovable squatter. He's the lovable squatter of the Walt Disney Company. It's a perfect end. It's a perfect end.
It vaguely reminds me of Tom Hanks in The Terminal.
Yes, it's very Terminal-esque. Yes, maybe that's subconsciously why I love it so much. I don't know. But speaking of Tom Hanks, though, I want to talk about kind of Floyd Norman's big eureka moment with Toy Story. So you're probably wondering why Toy Story 2 and not the original. Because Floyd Norman's been around. I'll tell you why. So Floyd Norman, the guy's been in the business so long, he has such great instincts. So Joe Ranft, story man extraordinaire, one of the big four who formulates, Toy Story and such going forward at Pixar. So the heart of Pixar animation, no longer with us, unfortunately. So Joe Ranft. He invited Floyd Norman to come on Toy Story with him, but unfortunately he was under contract at that time with Disney, doing the Mickey Mouse thing, I believe, and maybe some of the early feature work. So the latter Renaissance stuff, maybe. So 94 rolls around. He just by happenstance he kind of goes down there to the crummy, the crummy Point Richmond days of Pixar. And he glimpsed the story reel for Toy Story, like near completion, 94, when it comes out a year later. And he recognized, oh my God, the day we always talked about was on the rise. The computer upending the animation industry. The day where the computer's going to change everything, and just had this moment where he's just there at Pixar, just like witnessing this, and like just being in the know before anyone else, saying, "It's finally happened. It's finally happening. That's awesome." And the thing that I neglected to mention, the thing that brings him to Toy Story 2, he was working on a very famous, unrecognized project. He worked on the Roger Rabbit prequel.
Oh, really? Who,
yeah.
Was it, what was the title of it?
I'll tell you, it's Who Discovered Roger Rabbit.
Who Discovered Roger Rabbit,
okay.
Right.
So Floyd Norman actually gave some insight. So the project, he was working on Who Discovered Roger Rabbit, which is a prequel to the movie, and there was Zemeckis refused to be involved in it, so Zemeckis wasn't going to come on for it. And basically the story, you're not going to believe this, Tiki, but it's coming from Norman's mouth, man. Roger Rabbit was going to journey to Hollywood. We're going to show how he ended up in Hollywood. And he was going to go with a partner in his duo. He was going to. I don't know if it was going to be animated or live action. I don't know, but all I can tell you is who they got for the role. They got Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey was supposed to be. Oh,
dear God.
And essentially, the reason we don't have this movie, the reason it kind of broke down, was Steven Spielberg basically got into arbitration with Eisner. And they were basically just like going back and forth about who owned what and like how that's going to go. So it was a no-go, and then he ended up on Toy Story 2. And yet again, Floyd Norman saw the theatrical potential of Toy Story 2 in '97 when they're doing the direct-to-video thing. A year later, going theatrical. Floyd Norman's Nostradamus. It's Normadamus. I don't know. The man knows his stuff.
All right. Yeah. Then finally he gets welcomed back to the studio, right?
Yeah. So Floyd Norman, Disney came around on Norman. They threw him an 80th birthday party. They officially hired him back at the studio. It seems, like Eisner and Iger, even like you get like sent him like little the recognitions and letters and stuff, and probably a plaque or something. Maybe a plaque. I don't know. Again, we mentioned the Disney Legends thing already, but so he came back in a big way, and there's this really sweet little gesture. The Disney employees have these little ID badges, little blue ID badges, and Floyd kept his from back in the day. He had retirement stamped on it. Now he's got two of them. The man's got two little blue ID badges, which is like, you imagine, like no other animator has that, right? Because like how often could that possibly happen? It's real sweet, real nice.
All right, so that just kind of leaves us to the Impact Dragon, and yeah, I mean, I think that Floyd Norman is a character who, he was kind of like very humbly in the background for a lot of his career, but I feel like he kind of, he paved the way for other people to just kind of like break into the industry, do what they love to do. And I really feel like with the ageism thing, that's a big part of why I respect him so much. But also, of course, like you said, with the the educational films, and just kind of being the man of many hats, the man of many talents. I don't know. I just think it's a really cool story of his, and I think it's great that he's one of the very few animators left from Walt's era. I think he's a great ambassador of that time for the company. And so, yeah, I think this was a great start to this season of Black History Heroes. I can't wait to get to the next ones.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, absolutely. It was certainly, the unsung hero of, he's kind of the unsung hero of Disney animation that now, thankfully, we're singing about him, and people can sing about him, assuming they can have the same learning experience.
The Ballad of Floyd.
Yes, assuming people can find the kind of the best representation of that ballad, but
don't tip me, Dragon. Don't tip me. Don't let me whip out my acoustic guitar that I don't know how to tune.
Look, the point being, even if they could, the point is, the point is people can kind of do the covers on their own. They can find out about the man. They can look into the man with us, kind of talking about him here, and yeah, again, the fact that Disney had black animators not being such a publicized kind of thing. He did interviews where, again, Floyd Norman, importantly, at the end of the day, he never looked at it as like he was special. He was different than any other guys. Like, hey, I really love animation, and I took the initiative, and they accepted me. That's kind of what it was. My talent was good enough. They let me in. But again, it's this fact that there was a black animator at Disney that inspired a lot of young, aspiring black animators. Like, for example, Ron Husband. For some reason, I don't get why. I mean, I guess there's a reason. Ron Husband was the other earliest black animator at Disney, but he came in like in the 70s, where Floyd Norman came in 57. So clearly, Floyd Norman's early. But then again, if you want to be all technical, I want to say Ron Husband started off as an animator, or Floyd Norman started off as an in-betweener. Hence the arbitration, which I think is ridiculous. But come on, he's there, he's animating. Just he's not given the official title of animator, but he was there, man. He did the animation. Floyd Norman's the guy. Anyway, point being, inspired guys like Ron Husband, which is huge. Again, he worked on stuff like Atlantis, going all the way. Like Ron Husband's he's another great kind of pillar in that community. But Norman, he highlights and hopefully eradicates the ageism problem Disney had, and ultimately, at the end of the day, Floyd Norman is he's animation Stan Lee these days. He's very much kind of like he was kind of like what Stan Lee was for so many years. He was kind of like the walking symbol, the goodwill ambassador of the medium, and the elder statesman. He's that pillar. I think about it, Tiki. There are only 3 remnants of the Walt Disney era we really have left. If you think about it, look at Jungle Book. We have him, Richard Sherman, and the voice of Mowgli, Bruce Reiterman. Those are the last 3 guys left. Everyone in the business loves him. We love Floyd. He's fantastic.
All right, well, that's all for now, folks. Until the next time, we look at the next inspirational figure who showed us the world's not simply black or white, but brimming with color, as well as character.
On the next installment of Black History Heroes.
Bad boy Floyd with his aviator shades.
Floyd the